Ok, mesdames et messieurs, merci d'être toujours là. Aujourd'hui, on accueille Bastian Grimm, The Rise of Artificial Intelligence, Tools, Strategies and Tips to Drive Growth. Thank you.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, more AI. I think this is, I guess, the topic of the day, the year, however you want to call it. I saw my French is like close to non-existent, so I only picked up bits and pieces from, I guess, the previous talk. But I think it actually complements quite well because I have a bit of a different approach with, I guess, one goal for the day, and that's making you more efficient. I think that's the thing, right? Like we all need to do more with less. I think that would be ideal. Before we go there, we're going to do a quick, if my clicker is going to work, yes, we're going to do a quick warm-up. I know it's Friday, you probably all are hungover, so it's not going to be too embarrassing. I mean, only for me, not for you guys. But I asked my design team to kind of do a side-by-side, and basically we have one photo that's a stock photo, and the other one is generated by AI. I'm just going to see if you're like at least half awake and can spot which one of the photos is actually done by AI and which one is not. So we're just going to do that very, very easy, just show of hands. I'm going to see if you're awake. So let's get going. First one is just some very beautiful, apparently, flowers. So who thinks the left one, so A, is done by AI? Quick show of hands. That's half. And then B? That's 50-50, see? This is the problem. Actually, it's B, so that is correct. B is the AI one. So we're going to do one more. Jungle. Who thinks A is AI? B is AI? No, you're all wrong. It's A. See? So there we go. Okay, one more, and then you're all awake. Sunset, sunrise, whatever it is. Who thinks A is AI? That's more and more. B? Yeah, B is correct in this case. So, yeah, see, there we go. So I think, the point really is, and I give you, it's not the easiest on the big screen as well, but, even on the laptop screen with a high resolution, it's pretty hard to spot these days, if you do it well, if you know what you're doing, if you do, we're going to talk about prompts and these types of things in a second. But so this is predominantly done with Midjourney. You might be familiar with that one. I think they have done some massive improvements over the last just couple of weeks, and the new, like the version 5 is just, it's pretty impressive, to be honest, if you know what you're doing. And there's others as well, right? There's Dream Studio from Stability AI and a whole bunch of others. Like the idea is not to go through all of them, but like just that you're aware there's obviously also multiple solutions on the market. I think the big topic is prompting, right? So how are you actually using these generative AIs? And that's not only for imagery, but it's essentially true. And I think Paul has been showing some of the prompts for ChatGPT as well. So I think this is the big topic, right? So how can we as humans interact with AI? What's the kind of the secret sauce behind it? And I'm gonna go into this. One thing that I really like is called DS Prompt. By the way, I didn't say that. I'm gonna share the slides on social later on the hashtag, because there is, on the bottom left, there's always like links/sources. I mean, you're of course free to take photos, but I'm gonna share it. So one thing that I really like is DS Prompt Builder. The idea is basically what you can do is you can use kind of an image approach. So you pick a certain style or a certain shape or a certain type of image, and you drag and drop it, and it basically creates parts of the prompt for you. So essentially you can browse visually, and it kind of, I think, is an easy way to start going if you haven't done a lot of prompting yet, because I think it's far different from what we've done in the last 20 years doing Google searches. I mean, that is not prompts, right? Or there's a platform called PromptBase. You might have come across that as well. It's essentially a marketplace. So again, you can browse the marketplace. You can go there. You can find images. You can find content. You can find whatever you want. And basically, if you're like, okay, this is cool, then you can buy the prompt for like a tiny amount of cents or euros in that case. And I think the idea there is that it just helps you like a kickstart kind of a thing, because you don't need to figure out the prompt by yourself, but instead you have something that you can reuse and then adapt based to your needs. I think this is actually pretty helpful to just kind of speed things up. All right, so a bit more on the real world kind of use case side. And by the way, this is not solely SEO, it's going to be, I guess, search marketing in general, because I think there's a broad variety of use cases for any type of tool in AI these days. But one thing that we kind of play and use quite a lot is called Flair. So Flair AI, the idea is, so we have a client that's a large supermarket chain, and every week they do like they take a product they have and they place it in a certain environment. So let's say like a shampoo on an island, for example. Normally, they would have set up like a whole photo studio, right? With a background, they need to put the photos, the products there. It takes time, and therefore it costs money. With Flair, you can do that in literally 10 seconds, because you have an AI-generated background library. You can generate other backgrounds as well, and you're good to go. So it's for us, that was kind of an MVP with that client, and they were just obviously really happy because it kind of saves a ton of money for them, and they're faster. They have more variety, and you can use it also for paid search and other types of things. Clean up pictures is also quite cool. I think a lot of the things that we do in marketing is kind of annoying, tiny tasks, removing things from images, cutting, slicing, dicing, making them better. Again, 3 clicks of a button, you're good to go. So that could be a use case. Or this is actually quite nice. I hope you have seen this. But finally, but if you haven't, these are actually finally properly looking QR codes, right? Not the ugly stuff that we've been using the last 100 years, but something that finally looks beautiful. And the section in the middle, basically, is done by a stable diffusion model. So it comes out of a generative AI. And it actually works, which is pretty cool. And I think we're going to be seeing much more of those branded kind of QR codes that fit the kind of CI, CD, however you want to call it. And hopefully they do work. So yeah, it's the reason why I'm saying hopefully is like if you have played with the generator tools, like sometimes they do work, sometimes they don't. And the one thing that makes it harder is the longer the URLs are, you want a QR code, the more imagery needs to be generated, and then sometimes they break. So like one tip, if you want to play with it and you want to do it, use short URLs and put them in the QR code. It's just much better, and the chances of them working at the first try is significantly higher. There's a bunch of other use cases. I think Paul mentioned one of them as well. So like you can use it for header images, you can use it for social images, for even a whole bunch of images in the slide deck here are basically AI images, and of course image modification. So there's a whole bunch of use cases already, I think, that do work quite well if you know how to prompt. There's also some more scary ones, obviously. So this is from Osaka University in Japan. So they basically propose to use a stable diffusion model to reconstruct images from human brain activity. So I'm not entirely sure I want them to kind of visualize what's going to happen in my brain, especially not now. But I think these things are going to happen as well. And jokes aside, I guess there's certainly huge advancements when it comes down to a lot of the medical use cases moving forward, right? Speaking of scary stuff, though, I think this is also important to address. So I came across this statistic and I thought it's worth sharing. So 50% of the AI researchers believe that there's a 10% or greater chance that humans will go extinct from our inabilities to control AI. And you could argue it's something like this, right? So it's a bit like catching a flight where 50% of the engineers think that there's a 10% chance that everyone on the plane will die. So are you really going to get on the plane, is the question, I suppose. And I guess the answer is not, right? But you could now argue, well, yeah, it's kind of all this doomsday scenario situations, and it's an exaggeration, and maybe that's right, maybe it's not, I don't know. But the one thing I do know is that there is a whole bunch of software out there and this is now, and this is not the future, where voice and image cloning is already scary easy, and that's a big problem. So if you want to try it for yourself, 11 Labs for voice cloning and DeepFace Lab for image replacement cost you like $15. And so I did this for another talk, and I actually had like Barack Obama read one of the slides, and it's not 100% there yet, but it's scary close, and that's the problem. And it leads to a whole bunch of fraud, obviously, right? So this has been on Reuters the other day. So AI-powered face swapping was used to impersonate a friend during a live video call, because that actually works in video calls already. If you would wire another 600K, that's a different story, but the fact of the matter is, it is a problem, and the problem is it's not getting smaller, rather it's getting much bigger. Or there was this other photo, you probably have seen that as well, it was on social, despite Twitter being dead. It was an image from the Pentagon, and there was apparently a fire next to it. And I don't think that it's surprising that these images come up. What was scary to me, though, is the fact that at the same time when it got out, the stock market got a quick dip. So the impact is what scared me, not the fact that we have, you know, AI-generated fakes, because we have had fakes for years and years, right? This is nothing new. What's new, though, is how easy it is and the scale. I think this is, important conceptualized to just kind of keep that in mind, that this is, you know, as much as I enjoy the advancement in technology, that is a problem. So, and then, I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of things that we probably don't have access to that is not making it better. Anyhow, let's kind of do a very, very quick dive into some of the theories, because I think it's important to understand how things work, not just kind of use any type of AI tooling, but just really, I try to make it as simple as possible, like not hardcore techie stuff, but just really for you to kind of conceptualize some of the things. So I think important to understand is how these large language models that are powering most of the AI solutions actually work. And I think essentially you could say it's like a deep learning algorithm that can recognize, summarize, translate, predict, and the important part is generate text. The misunderstanding is that those large language models, they don't write anything, right? They can't. What they do is they generate something, like an output, based on input, based on their training data. But it's not that they're in any way, shape, or form creative. They just have been trained on some data, and then based on the data, they can generate something else. And if you look at, you know, any of the kind of models that have been released in recent months or even years, one thing that I think that stood out is the fact that everyone is kind of battling for size. So if we take, like, you know, Google's Mom and BERT, I think both models you're probably familiar with, because kind of there's been a lot of talk about it, and some are old. One is older, the other one is more recent. But the thing is, if you compare BERT, which has been, like, back then trained on just Wikipedia data, roughly 50 million kind of articles, and then you compare it to a Mom, which has been trained on something that's called Common Crawl. You might be familiar with it. It's essentially like a representation of the web, not fully, but essentially it's a web crawl. But the interesting part here is, like, it's roughly 3 billion pages. So obviously, I mean, especially from a marketing standpoint, it's very easy to say, well, that one thing is 10 times more powerful, just because of the fact that, you know, it has had much bigger training data, right? I think more important, though, than data size really is data quality. So essentially, what is powering what has been used to train the models? Because there are, like, really, really big ones, like you know, like the like Megatron, for example, or also even bigger ones that have been built in China called Wudao, like 1.5 trillion parameters. But what does that even mean, right? And the problem is, and especially the SEOs might kind of enjoy this one, is that there is a big question in terms of how trustworthy is the data that is in those large language models. So this is like a concept of a paper that has been released. It's called front-running data poisoning. And the idea is basically, if you would know when a snapshot is being collected and then put into one of the large language models, so essentially when there's a common crawl collecting data, you could maliciously modify, let's say, Wikipedia, which is part of the data source, and even if someone would see that and notice that and revert it back, it's already too late, because the wrong info had already been put into the large language model, which means that if you query the large language model, it essentially is going to answer with wrong facts or modified facts, right? And if you have, you know, those good old expired domains from back when, then this is also a problem, because obviously if they are part of a data set, or actually if you can get a hold of a whole bunch, and they are part of a data set, that obviously also means you control information within a large language model, which, you know, can be used for good, but can also be used for bad. There's a whole bunch of challenges with large language models as well, you know, from computing power, right? So, you know, gains are nowadays incremental, but costs are increasing exponentially. There is bias in training data. We're going to talk about that in a second. There's, of course, environmental impact, just because training those models is not very friendly in relating to our carbon footprint. And then there is the issue of static perspectives, because when models are being built and trained, you know, they will be used for quite a while. That means that obviously some of that stuff is outdated. I'm saying partially because with the implementation in Bing and also ChatGPT with the browsing kind of plugin, there you kind of have more recent info. But in general, large language models are actually static. That means some of the stuff is old, and you can't really use them for recent things. On bias, this is from Amazon. Actually kind of scary, or, well, not scary, but like sad example. So essentially they kind of build an AI to help scale recruiting, and essentially what happened, if you kind of obviously know the industry a bit, then a lot of these CVs came from white male, right, that has been fed into a machine learning algorithm. I mean, if you're somewhat familiar with machine learning, then what happens, garbage in, garbage out. The model obviously learned at some point, well, men's CVs are preferable. That means like women's CVs have been downgraded, right? So this is a general problem with machine learning, obviously. So if you have biased training data into any other direction, then obviously the output is going to be the same. It's going to be biased as well. But I think this is very important to understand because even the models that we're working with, ChatGPT, is obviously, it has a very American approach to some of the responses, right? So hopefully by now you're at least a bit scared. I see some nods. That's good. That is the whole goal of this exercise. No, on a serious note, because that's the fun part of the presentation. There's a whole bunch of really cool tech out there, but I think it's very important to understand like the underlying restrictions and also potential downsides of if you use a certain tool, because it might be biased or the output might be biased, for example. So I think a lot of the stuff today is around efficiency and growth, because I think this is right now, at least from a use case perspective, what you can do with AI. A lot of this stuff is moving way too fast, so like there might be things that are just not there in 6 months' time. I have a favorite new website, if you're not familiar with it. This is the bookmark you need for the day. There is an AI for that.com, because literally there is, and the funny part is, so this is like hosting 5,300 and something different AIs right now. This is the screenshot from last week, and I kid you not, like 4 weeks ago it says like 3,000 AIs. I mean, obviously, everyone and their mother is doing something AI. So my point here is, I think there's probably 80% of those that are not going to survive the next 12 months, just because a lot of the AI tools out there right now, they're predominantly trying to solve smaller things, but what's going to happen is eventually they will be absorbed by the bigger models moving forward. So the reason why I'm saying this is, if you are implementing something now, I mean, that's totally fine, but just be mindful that some of those tools might not be there moving forward. So if you have a lot of time, or if it takes a lot of time to implement things, that might be worth considering as well. So what kind of to choose and what not, right? Speaking of, I think what's also important is, don't become the next Samsung. I hope you have seen this. It was in the press, but essentially some employees thought it would be a smart idea to use or challenge unreleased concepts of said company and see if the model would have any improvements. I mean, that's maybe not the smartest idea, to take proprietary confidential data, dump it into a public model. Should be obvious, but I guess it wasn't. Anyways, from the implementation side, I think one thing especially the SEOs in the room kind of have had contact with is generative AI for text, right? There's a whole bunch of them, from a Jasper to Copy AI to a whole bunch of others. I'm not going to pick a single one. I guess the reason is that it really depends on what you want to achieve. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. Some have limitations, some don't. So easy peasy in the middle, for example, like the name of that one. Anyways, is more towards like, I want to create copy for my Amazon ads versus like, a Jasper, for example. It can do a whole lot more, but it does have a very different approach to it, right? You can use it to draft blog posts or anything else. So really, it depends on what you want to achieve. But I just give it a spin. The one thing that's true for all of them is basically never, ever, ever, ever publish this nonsense without checking. There's a whole lot of reasons for it, but the biggest problem right now is that large language models hallucinate. That just means that basically they make stuff up, and that's sadly on you to figure out which part is true and which is not. And I guess also from a process perspective, you need to see if using like an LLM to research and even draft something is in fact faster than creating from scratch, because it really significantly depends on the type of content that you need to produce, if that is the case or not. But nevertheless, whatever you do, make sure that you do fact checks. Because this really reflects how bad it is right now. So if you're just going to be, if you're going to be curious, just kind of do a Google search for as an AI language model, and you will see what I mean. It's basically been used to spam Amazon, to spam Yelp, to spam a whole bunch of other places. So basically, people are faking reviews and other things using, any type of model. And it would be easy to block that. The reason why I'm saying this is, like, we are just not prepared for all the things that those models currently actually are being used for, right? I mean, it's not rocket science to filter out any text that kind of has that pattern, but nevertheless, the big platforms don't, most of them at least. On audio, there's a whole bunch of cool things happening as well. Favorite one right now is called Beethoven, not just because I like the name, but also because they do a really cool stuff. So if you're producing video or a podcast, for example, you need a jingle or an intro and outro, and you're just bored of like having to find royalty-free kind of audio clips or jingles or whatever. This is great. They have a mood board, so you can really produce music, actually, with not much effort. There's a whole bunch of others as well. Again, podcasting, I would recommend you have a look at Descript. If you want to scale marketing in general, what I really love is Soundbite. So Soundbite basically takes your video and prepares it for automatic distribution on all the social channels. So it cuts it, slices it, makes intros and outros and these types of things. So basically, it takes video and makes ready social posts. Again, coming back to what I've been saying, increasing efficiency, speed, that might be a very nice way to scale things. Speaking of video, there's a whole bunch of things going on there as well. One thing that we've been using quite a bit is called Maverick. So the idea is that Maverick allows video personalization. So what does it mean? Essentially, you record a video once, and in the video, you technically use kind of placeholders. So let's say you record this one video, but it can dynamically inject customer names, for example, if you know them, or other personalized information. And this is really cool to scale things, because normally you would have to record an individual video for each and every one, but in this case, you only record it once, and then the AI even changed like the lip movement and these types of things. So it's really cool. We had a client that is in skincare, and they, at the point where they kind of knew the customer, and then between like them putting something in the basket, we had this personalized video being added, and it actually increased the adding to basket conversion by 10%. So it was really nice with an easy way to scale. Murph is a bit of a similar approach. Murph AI allows you to do ad creation at scale, creation and localization, which is also quite cool especially for social ads. So in this case, we had a video in German and in English, and we needed to roll it out into the French market as well. So we did all the dubbing and the transcription using Murph, because the client just didn't had enough like local employees to voice and create the scripts. So these types of things you can do really well with AI solutions. There's a whole bunch of other things on video. One thing that I find quite fascinating is called Runway, or basically it's Gen 2 by Runway. So essentially, any type of video is on the left as a recording, and then you have a driving image for a style, and then it produces a certain output. And I think this is quite cool, because what's going to happen, I guess, is it might revolutionize video production, just because of the fact that you do not need to render the right anymore. It's just it's a transition, which is significantly cheaper in terms of production effort. So I think this is quite cool. Productivity, I think, is the big topic. Like if you kind of take away one tool, I suppose one of the next two slides is for you. So the first one that I really love is Compose AI. I'm not sure if you have seen that one. It is basically autocomplete on steroids in your Chrome. So essentially, it learns from how you would write or reply to something in the browser, so you can use it for your WhatsApp tab or whatever. So give it a week, and then it kind of mimics your style. It works with any language, so it even does German, to my surprise, so it should work with French as well, but I think that's a good way to do it. And if you're more in the Microsoft universe, so Outlook, then there's a plugin called Mail Maestro, which I really love. The cool thing is, I'm not sure about you guys, but I get like way too much emails, like long emails, a lot of things in there, and I just don't have the time to read it all. And they have a really cool feature, which is called action point extraction. So it basically runs it through the OpenAI large language model, and then does a summary. Like they do a summary, and you get the summary and the takeaways on the bottom right, so I don't have to read the full email, which is quite cool. Taplio is something you could use for scaling your personal branding on LinkedIn. Basically, they plug it into your profile, and they kind of understand what you have been interacting with, and also the type of content that you have been produced in the past, and then it kind of suggests you what to create in the future. So I think this is also like a huge time saver. You don't have to come up with a whole bunch of new ideas, but rather you get some suggestions moving forward. If you hate Excel with a passion, like I do, Excel Formula Bot might be your best new friend. So basically you describe a problem, and it creates the respective formulas for you, so you don't have to do all the nonsense by yourself. And I know you're going to say, yeah, you can do that with ChatGPT as well. Obviously, you're completely correct, but I hate moving between different things. So this is natively embedded in Excel, which is really cool. Last but not least, if you spend way too much time in meetings, Otter AI is probably going to be your new best friend. However, I have to say this is pretty garbage if it's not English. So my apologies. I think it's going to be, hopefully, getting better in the future. Like I tried it for German meetings, it failed miserably. The summaries are shit. It doesn't understand anything. So I didn't test it in French. Might give it a spin, but anyways. The concept, I think, though, is quite cool, and I think you probably have seen that Zoom and others already announced that these types of features as well. I guess auto summaries from meetings and then extraction of things, I think, is something that we'll be seeing natively in most of the platforms moving forward as well. But I think the idea is quite cool to just really save some time. One thing, I guess, that oftentimes comes, especially as a challenge for marketers, is that we're not necessarily developers, right? But one thing that you see much more is kind of a push towards no-code. So one thing, and there's a whole bunch of others as well. One platform that you could have a look at is Riku, or we have been using Raiku. We have been using Accio quite a lot. So Accio is essentially, you can plug in any type of data source. It can be as simple as a spreadsheet, but it can also be a database like a BigQuery or something else. So depending on how complex the data or data source is. But essentially what it then allows you to do is to run machine learning code on the database, but without you having to actually create the code, but rather you can choose from ready-made models. So you can use that, for example, for sales forecasting if you have sales data, right? Or you can use it for churn prediction if you have your client data, or for lead scoring if you have set data at hand. And there's a whole bunch of other models because, let's be honest, this is not new challenges, right? They have been solved over and over again. So you can basically rely on that machine learning, on those machine learning algorithms. They're kind of out of the box. Of course, you can adjust them if you want, but I think this is really cool because it saves us as marketers a whole bunch of time. We don't have to wait for developers. We can just move faster and play with things and try things out. Then obviously on the ChatGPT side, a couple of quick things there as well. Who is not using ChatGPT yet? Can I get a quick show of hands? Be honest, come on. I did this yesterday and there were much more hands, so you're all using ChatGPT. Who is not using ChatGPT Plus? There's more hands, okay. It's worth the $20. That's the one thing. If you're using the other one, it's worth the $20 for various reasons. What you see on the left, for those that are not using it, is how it looks like when you have the Pro plan. So you have a browsing feature and you have a plugin feature. And I think especially the plugin feature is pretty interesting. So we're going to talk about that in a second. I want to spend a bit of time on prompting real quick. I think I understood at least that Paul mentioned some tips on prompting as well. Just a quick heads up or basically quick summary of what I think is important in terms of prompting. You can do and you should be very, very, very thorough with your prompt and very specific of what you want to achieve. What does that mean? You can specify a role. So who is ChatGPT acting as? You can and should specify the context. So what is the situation the thing is creating for? Then on instructions, what specifically do you want it to do? A format, you can define and you should define the output you're expecting. That can be, certain type of code. It can be a table. It can be give me multiple options. But be specific of what you want to get out of it. And most people don't know that, but you can provide examples as an input. So basically, if you have something that's like, yeah, this is what I want, give this as an input example, because then the output is getting much better. And lastly, also, of course, constraints. So what should this thing not be doing? I think be as thorough as you can. Make sure that you have words that don't have double meanings, so be very, very specific, because otherwise, usually, it doesn't, I mean, it does work, but you do get something that you probably weren't expecting in the first place. There is, if you need some inspiration, there's a plugin called AI PRM. You might have heard of that. I think the concept and the idea is, again, not all the prompts that are in this thing are great, but the idea is it gives some inspiration, and it might make you move faster, right? So have a look at that. They have predefined prompts for a whole bunch of different things. On browsing, just so that everyone understands how this works, normally ChatGPT doesn't have access to the internet. With browsing, it actually does. It essentially uses the Bing technology, and you can then specify, so I did a query, said, well, I'm in London July 2nd, I like trance music, please create me a plan for the weekend, give me different options. I mean, this is still a very simple prompt, but for the sake of it, what it does, and you can see it on the right-hand side, it actually executes a variety of different searches on Bing, and then goes on those websites, kind of takes the data and brings it back. So essentially, it's enriching the existing data in the large language model, because without the browsing, the thing wouldn't be able to answer something from the future, right? That's the point, because it hasn't been fed with the training data. So I think this is important to understand. And then on the plugin side, there's some really cool stuff. I think Lily probably mentioned it yesterday. I wasn't there, sadly, but one of the plugins that is really cool is Link Reader, and there's a whole bunch of others. Webflow is another one. But the idea is that you obviously can also interact, for example, with websites and different types of data formats. So you can summarize PDFs and a whole bunch of other things. I think the integration, from plugins into large language models is one big topic for the future as well. Main reason is that if you treat like a ChatGPT from a marketing perspective like a traffic channel, because there is already so many people on the platform, that technically means that if, with a plugin integration, and you can manage, for example, execution, then you will basically be able to kind of really speed up on delivery, and essentially people do not necessarily even have to visit your website in the first place. Last thing, I got the 4-minute warning. Thank you, sir. We want to make it. Is search. I think we're all aware of what happened when, I guess, Microsoft's integration really kicked things off, right, with the whole thing going crazy. I think ads is a big question mark right now. Like, there is sometimes ads, and sometimes they disappear, and then they come back in different ways, shapes, or forms. So I guess from a search marketer's perspective, that's a big question mark. I don't have an answer, but I guess we just have to wait and see. I mean, BART is an interesting one, even though officially we can't use it here. You can just use a VPN, set your IP address to the US, and then bart.google.com, give it a play. I am honestly not really impressed. Also, same story, if you have not access yet to the SGE, to the Search Generative Experience, you can put yourself on the waiting list. That does work from Europe as well. Just use a VPN, set the IP to the US, and you're good to go. This is how it looks like. You can query, and it's like, I did tiny orange, you can eat whole, and then you get like a description and some imagery. This is, I think, quite clear. What you can also do, obviously, is something like this: most valuable tech startups in France, and then you get different ways, shapes, or forms of answers. The problem with most of it is, so I did another query as a follow-up, so how many unicorns are there in France, right? So the company is worth more than 1 billion. Told me that there are 26 unicorns in France as of 2022. It's like, okay, interesting. So I did the same query again, got a different answer. So apparently there are 36. So I have no fucking idea how many unicorns there are in France, but you guys might know better. That's my point, right? Even with the implementation on Google, it makes stuff up, because most probably it doesn't have the one single answer. The training data is not good enough, so we're back to hallucination. Yeah, it's all broken, honestly. But anyways, the point is, why should you care? That's a good question, I guess. I think, generally speaking, moving forward, and I have no idea if the implementation remains the same, SEO is going to be not getting easier, but harder, especially on the information side. So basically, top of the funnel, we're kind of trying to get traffic with blog posts. I think if they roll this out, it might look different. I think just the informational side to gain traffic is much harder. Generative AI is not only happening on organic, but also on ads. That's quite clear. That's not there yet. If you want to do and play with it, there's a cool implementation. Optimizer released something that's a Google Sheet where you have basically the OpenAI API integrated to give it a play. You can also do that through the playground, obviously. And the last thing, and then we are through, is AutoGPT, which is quite cool as well. So if you don't want to do too much time on prompting, then you can actually automate the creation of prompts. So that's quite cool. Final word on new models. One thing that didn't get much attention is Gemini, or Gemini, as I learned. And the interesting part is it's supposed to be true multimodality. And that actually means that it can work with different types of data, not only text, but also imagery, audio, text as well, obviously, and gesture. So this is quite impressive. It's not there yet, but it got announced at Google I/O. It didn't get much coverage. Last 3 slides, I promise. There we go. So where is AI moving towards in the future? That's a very good question. I think one answer is Amazon, or part of the answer is Amazon, I think. Not only because their on-site search is pretty garbage, and they're probably going to add something like a ChatGPT to their own website, but also because they're pushing out a whole bunch of new models right now. Bill Gates disagrees. He thinks Amazon and Google might be disappearing altogether. I'm not buying that one, but anyways. Microsoft is pushing hard as well. We all know that, especially on the Windows side, like with the integration into Windows 11 and in the taskbar. So essentially, we will be seeing large language models at operating system level, not only in the web. Models will generate their own training data. That's for sure as well. I mean, they do already with one goal, and that is kind of to improve themselves. Fact-checking as well, because, you know, we have seen there's a whole bunch of hallucination going on. I spare you this one, worthwhile reading though, because I think model infrastructure and architecture might change. One thing, and that's the closing for today, is there's a post on the OpenAI blog which is worth reading. Quick citing one thing, that is this: successfully transitioning to a world with superintelligence is perhaps the most important and hopefully a scary project in human history. Success is far from guaranteed. Boundless downsides and upsides. They will hopefully unite us all. Meanwhile, we have US fighter jets being controlled by not 1, but 4 different AIs. I'm not sure if that makes me feel much better, but at least it's 4 and not 1. Are we ready for this? I am not sure, but that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much. Yeah, and I put the slides on social, I promise. That's going to happen, because there's a whole bunch of things in there, so if you want to kind of grab them, that's there. Sorry for running over.
Thank you so much, Bastian. So, any question? In English, please. Who wants to try?
Don't be shy.
Any question? You want to make a break and to eat something, maybe?
Great praise.
Thank you.
You talk about plugin for ChatGPT. What are the best plugin you use to create content?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm an SEO at heart, right? So there's one plugin that I like a lot. It's called Webflow. So Webflow is essentially, you could say, a browsing plugin, but it also allows like data scraping and data manipulation. So yeah, Webflow I like really a lot because it seems to be the most reliable. There's one cool thing that I've seen people doing is they actually, when they build a prompt for ChatGPT, then they use the Webflow plugin to take data out of, for example, a Google spreadsheet and then enrich their prompt with the data from the sheet. So yeah, Webflow I like a lot. Link Reader I use quite a bit. I think this is also some really cool like SEO use cases, like you know, JSON data extraction or creating schema markup and these types of things. But I also think you really should look into building your own plugins, because it's super easy, right? It's JavaScript code essentially. It's no rocket science really, and I think it allows to bring in stuff that ChatGPT doesn't know yet. So I think if you can extend it to like data from your website, that might be an interesting business case. But yeah, the 2 mentioned are the ones that I'm currently using most.
Thanks.
Any question? It's okay? So, if you want, you can come to the break.
You need coffee, yeah? Yeah, that's fair enough.
We can drink a coffee.
Sorry for that.
Thank you. On redémarre à 11h20. Merci beaucoup.